and this is another week of The VUU. Hashtag the VUU on Twitter, and welcome to those of you who have joined us. Today we'll be talking about the People's Climate March with Peggy, Clarke, and Susan Milnor, and we'll get to them in just a moment. But first, I'd like our regulars to say hello.
Hi, everybody. This is Patrice Curtis coming to you from the Washington, D.C. area.
Hi, this is Tom Shade coming to you from Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Hi, I'm Joanna Fontaine Crawford coming to you from Austin, Texas.
Hi, I'm Aisha. I'm in Seattle, Washington.
Behind that chalice, we have Bob LaValle, who's helping us out with tech today, and behind that icon of a man waving his arms in the air is Hank Purse, who will be back momentarily. So before we get to our main story of the day, the People's Climate March, what else is going on? Patrice, you're doing some stuff there with voter registration in D.C., right?
Well, it's partially D.C., but really it's Charlotte, North Carolina. So there are quite a few congregants here at All Souls Church in Washington, D.C., who have been phone banking, calling down into North Carolina to encourage people to register to vote. And there will be they went down for Memorial Mondays. A group of us are going down next weekend to actually go door to door and to knock, and we've been preparing for that with all sorts of great training, and really looking forward to going down there and supporting the Charlotte UU Church and the actions down there. It's just about getting people out to register, letting people know how important it is for their voice to be heard. And sometimes people get weary, they feel, why bother? And so, we're just down there in service to folks who have been working in North Carolina for months. And
what's the center of the training? I mean, when you do the training, what is it that people really need to learn?
Well, the thing that stands out for me the most, of course, is that we're mostly Northerners going to a Southern state. So we have, so there's some cultural differences there. It's the richness of the United States, which I love. But we also have to be, kind of careful. And when you're coming in from the outside, it can really seem like, like we have all the answers, or, all that big-headed stuff that can come with it. And the training just kind of grounds us, in the fact that we are in service to those who live in North Carolina. They've actually asked us to come down there. And so the last thing we want to do is go down there and be like, hey, okay, we're here. What do you want us to do, kind of thing. So it's really about it's that. Plus, there's also some racial differences that we might encounter. There's the bugaboo, the pink elephant in the room that you don't like to talk about, which is socioeconomic differences, perhaps. So there's quite a lot of different things. And for me, when I go into any kind of area where I'm different, I just try to ground myself in listening. I try to become like a hyper listener, and just try to keep my energy very, in myself, and just, it's a real opportunity for you to take that position of being a servant. And, we need some reminders, reminders about, how to go about doing that. So I think it's going to be fabulous. I think it's really going to be fabulous. Yeah. So more to come. We're leaving on Thursday and Friday. We'll be there over the weekend. And on Sunday, wow, this is huge. Reverend William Barber, who is the spearhead for Memorial Mondays, is going to be preaching at the Charlotte UU Church. I mean, what a gift. So
that's fabulous. Do you know, is that going to be a podcast or live streamed or anything? He's amazing.
I have no idea. I would suspect not. But you never know.
You never know.
Yeah. So wow, what a way for us to be able to end our time there.
Do you say that you suspect not because it's in the South and the South's kind of backwards? Is that why you're saying that? Is that? Oh, sorry.
Hank?
Hank needs some training.
I'm just
Hank needs some
putting
training.
it out there. I want to make sure that your assumptions are good.
No, my assumptions were more about most of our UU churches don't do that kind of thing. You know, we're
Well,
not.
many of them do podcast later, so
It's UUs that are backward, Hank. It's not. It's not Southern.
That was a subtext there. If you want to say anything, let's poke fingers at ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's Charlotte. Looking forward to sharing when I get back. Yeah.
That's great. And I'm looking at my friend Susan Milnor here, who's a Southerner, going, I've heard that before.
Absolutely.
You've heard which part exactly? The part that Hank said? I hope.
Exactly. From the New Englander, too.
Yep, exactly. Well, I hope it goes well. And how many of you are going, Patrice? A lot, or a bus, or a few?
Well, the Charlotte UU Church, there could be a whole bunch of us, and they really asked us to keep to an extremely manageable number because they are actually, homestaying us, and I mean they're our host. So, we're looking at maybe somewhere around 25 or 30 folks. They could take up to 40, but yeah. And of course, we also have the challenge that people have to take time off. And there's also a big get out the vote coming up in October. So a lot of folks are sort of saving up and saying, okay, I can do one or the other, but I can't do both. And I think the get out the vote is probably going to have a lot. It's going to be very different than what we're doing today, I think. So, yeah.
Wow. Thank you for that. That's good work.
Yeah.
Tom, you've been obsessed with voter registration for a while now, but you're muted, if whatever you're saying.
I wouldn't say I'm obsessed. I have other obsessions, but we won't go into those. But no, yeah, I mean, voter registrations, I'm really excited by the work they're doing, and I think it's, it reminds you of, 1964. I just did the Mississippi Summer Freedom Project Living Legacy Tour in the summer, and, people going to Mississippi to help register people to vote, of course, against much greater obstacles than today in North Carolina, but still incredibly important. So,
actually, some people in Minnesota just got arrested for trying to get people to register to vote. So some of the obstacles haven't changed, tragically.
A minister got arrested in North Carolina for, some of you might have seen the video, for just putting flyers on folks' cars at a mall or something.
That's what these people got arrested for trespassing, and it got really harsh. It got very, very harsh.
Oh my
That
goodness.
was ridiculous.
So we're not that far from 1964, sadly. All over the country. I'm in Minnesota where that just happened. So Tom, you were going to say something?
Well, we had, this is Tom Hayden week at the University of Michigan, because Tom Hayden donated all his papers to the University of Michigan.
For our younger viewers, or
yeah, no, for our younger
or those who just have forgotten by now.
Right, or who I'm confused with Tom
Hanks.
Tom Hayden was one of the authors of the Port Huron Statement, one of the founders of SDS. He was editor of the Michigan Daily here, and he was on a Freedom Ride.
Stop. SDS, excuse me?
Students for Democratic Society.
But not everybody knows that.
My goodness. All right. I know. Well, see, one of the things that was shocking about Tom Hayden was that he had turned into a little old man, and I guess I am too. So anyway, there he was. See, I went to a class he taught at the U on Tuesday on kind of general theories around social movements and change in the United States. It was very interesting, and so I was kind of revved up afterwards. And he also gave a big lecture at the library down March. So I missed that because I had something else to do. But he's out banging the drum for that. So that'll tie into the rest of our program.
I think it's inspiring to see people who keep at activism for decades and decades.
Yeah.
It's very
even when they turn into little old guys.
Exactly.
Speaking strange acronyms that nobody else understands.
Well, I have an 18-year-old, and recently I said something about the quilt, which to me is the quilt. Who could? And Gia said, "What's that?" And
Yeah.
I actually started to cry. I just said, "The quilt," because for me that holds so much emotion. And to hear that this 18-year-old was very politically savvy, never heard of it. And when I described the enormity, I could tell it just went like, whatever, yawn, like my parents talking about World War II or something, So, yeah.
And
suddenly,
the long walk in the snow up to their hips.
exactly.
Yeah.
Suddenly we are those old farts, yeah. Hey, Joanna, what's up with you and Weird Austin, besides people taking goats to the Home Depot?
Yeah, okay. Wasn't that fun? A sheep, actually, a sheep in a diaper with suspenders. Yeah, only in Austin.
No.
Yeah,
Tell me
I
it's not
swear it's
so.
on my Facebook page. This photo is not doctored. A friend of my sister's took it. Nothing but fun here in Austin. We are getting ready for Pride, which is happening this weekend, and I have a scoop. For some of you who know the Reverend Meg Barnhouse, the theme for Pride this year in Austin is Wizard of Oz. And there is, the word on the street is that the very dignified Reverend Meg Barnhouse will be on a float dressed as Glinda the Good Witch. So you heard it here.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
Isn't that awesome?
As soon as you said that, I thought, Glinda the Good Witch.
Yes, and those of you who know Reverend Marisol Caballero, she will be dressed as Dorothy.
And you, Joanna, are you going to dress up?
I'll wear a Standing on the Side of Love shirt.
Well,
and my clerical collar and rainbow pin.
Hey, nothing wrong with that.
Is that considered dressing up?
I call it Friday attire.
Nice.
Well, I love your Weird Austin stuff. It keeps me laughing, and sometimes you really need that.
I think in the middle of winter, I think we should have a VUU live from Austin. All of you Northerners, we'll get you down here in warm Austin.
Works for me. Yeah, have your installation. We can all come and do a live from your installation. Aisha, what about you? Is it cold yet out there, or you got all the kids tucked in your RE program?
This morning is one of our Seattle gray days. We haven't had one in probably about 3 weeks, actually. It's been bright and sunny and very un-Seattle-like. So while, of course, climate change is horrible and concerning, for Seattle is a little bit of a bright side in that it's been incredibly sunny for the past year. So, but no, it's okay. We'll go back to clouds all the time. I definitely want the climate to get back on track. And so, Joanna, you had told the story of somebody in Austin dropping off a skull, and I recently was at Goodwill here in Seattle, and the first thing the man asked me is, "You don't have any body parts, do you?" I'm like, no, yeah. I guess now they have to ask.
Just what I dropped in. Just what I walked in with.
Exactly.
There you go. There you go. Hey, well, I want to give a shout out. I know that many people are preparing to see the Ministerial Fellowship Committee right now, and that you're nervous. And I just want to, really tell you how many of us are rooting for you to be great ministers and shine forth with your very best self. And also to give a shout out to the people who serve on that committee. Has anybody here ever served on it?
Mm-mm.
It is so much work. I mean, it would be a great privilege to do it, but my God, how much work
just those packets. We did a mock MFC for someone here in Austin who I know is going to do fabulous. And but just reading his one packet, took so much time and energy, and here they're having to do it for many people. Yeah. So.
And
once again, in the vein of SDS, let us say that the MFC is the Ministerial Fellowship Committee. It's the credentialing body for ministers in the UUA. Just keeping it honest. Keeping it honest.
Thank you. There you go. Yes.
The first time SDS and the MFC have ever been compared.
I thought that sentence was going to go someplace. Now, the first time that the SCS and the MFC were together was when Paul Sawyer saw the MFC in 1970, or you know. I thought that sentence was going to go very differently.
Hey, oh, and can I check in?
Please, I'm sorry. Check in.
Just in honor of the vote in Scotland today. I don't know if you can see my I'm wearing some nice plaid trousers. Can you see those? Some nice, my new plaid trousers. Maybe you can't. Okay.
I was so afraid you were going to have a kilt on, Hank.
I do own one.
I was so afraid we were going to see something else that was started to get the back view. Like, oh no.
Freedom!
Well, I'm glad we haven't yet scared away our special guests.
Yes, I think they're still sort of smiling.
Yes. It's early.
Today we are joined by Susan Milnor, the interim senior minister at Fourth Universalist Society of New York City, and by Peggy Clarke, who's a racial and social justice consultant of the Metro New York District, and the minister of First Unitarian Church in Hastings-on-Hudson. That's where Pete Seeger lived, right? That's how I think of that town.
No, he was up in Poughkeepsie, actually, where I interned.
Okay, well there. It's a beautiful part of the world, and we get to see it behind you. So,
welcome to my home.
There's a lot of energy about this People's Climate March coming up. So why don't you just start, Peggy, by telling us who called it, who's coming, what it is, and what your youth are doing with it. And then Susan's church is really involved, so we really want to hear from her about all the things they're doing. So take it away, Peggy. Tell us.
Sure. Well, it started out, the United Nations was working on a report that came out in 4 parts. Last part was in the spring, and as soon as they came out with the last part, the United Nations decided they needed a summit to look again at what we're doing as a planet. Kyoto is going to expire in 2015, so it was really time. And as soon as they announced that they were having this summit, a bunch of folks said, what are we doing about it? They're going to be here in New York. So really they've been using the Occupy model. It's a really decentralized model. People sign on to do their piece of it. It's become a massive march. The most conservative numbers I've heard now are 300,000, and the most ambitious are 1 million. So we're talking about a lot of people coming to New York. Unitarian Universalists are coming out in force. I am stunned by the numbers. I was trying to think of how many UUs there actually are. Does anyone know? Because we're expecting, like, our conservative number is 1,000 UUs coming to New York.
Oh, how many UUs there are, period?
How many are there altogether? Yeah.
I think the current number of adults is about 160,000. Am I right?
So 1,000 is a really significant number. So when I was looking at the numbers, I thought, wow, there's a whole lot of us going to be here on Sunday. And our plan, we're joining what's called the Faith Contingent. We're part of an interfaith group. They're about, the conservative number for that group is 10,000, which, you know, we're hoping to keep it as, because that's the space we have is for 10,000 people. We're going to have a really spectacular interfaith prayer service beforehand as we're all gathering. We're going to pray together with Buddhist and Hindu and Shinto and UU. Peter Morales is going to be part of that service, and then we're marching with hundreds of thousands of other people through New York to say, you know, it's time. This is the issue of our day, and we're going to do whatever it is we can do to make a change.
Now we'll get back to some of that, but Susan, I'm curious. It's always, I remember when there'd be big events in D.C., there was always this tension of, do we have our own service and then join? Do we tell everybody? So what are you all doing there at Fourth Universalist?
Well, there is that tension, and at some point you just have to decide what you're going to do and do it, and understand that the weekend is going to unfold and it's going to have a spirit of its own, and you're going to be part of it. We are... one of the things we're trying to do at Fourth Universalist is to offer hospitality to as many people as we can who are coming to this great but sometimes intimidating city, and many of whom have been desperate about where they were going to stay. We actually have, I think now, 133 people who are going to be sleeping Saturday night in our gymnasium, which is in the basement of the church. Now, what I'm not sure whether they know is that they are going to have to sleep with the lights on because it's a motion detecting system, so anytime somebody moved, the lights would come on. So you get the image.
Things. Yeah.
Gymnasium, lights glaring.
Is that ecological for the lights to be on the whole time? Is that really?
No, but I don't think we have technological control over it. Is the bottom line. So those folks are going to be.
Wait, can't you just go to the fuse box?
Well, we could, but then if they needed to go to the bathroom, it could be very dangerous. Very dangerous.
So, are you taking donations for eye masks?
Listen, I suggested that we give them away, but the staff was not impressed with that. Anyway, so those folks are landing
Put the
here.
Standing on the Side of Love logo on eye masks.
Wouldn't that be great? And sell them.
Sell them, exactly.
Now, this is on Saturday evening after a long scheduled wedding happens in the church. So there's that whole thing, too. But so these folks, we really are trying to offer them the hospitality, and the next morning we're going to provide bagel and tea and coffee and juice. Saturday night at 10 p.m. right here in our sanctuary, there's going to be an interfaith worship service called Raucous But Reverent, which is being sponsored and done by young adults. And Tim DeChristopher is going to be speaking at that, and that's going to be, as they describe it, a sanctuary Boston type of service with a lot of feeling and a lot of spirited music, and we expect to have quite a few people attending at 10 p.m. for that.
Well, that's fabulous.
And I'm sorry, what?
That's fabulous. That's really exciting.
Yeah. It's going to be really great, and we have a very active young adult group in this congregation, and they are really psyched about bringing that to the church. And then Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, an hour before our usual time, we're going to be doing a brief service, and we have guests. We have 2 buses of guests coming from the VUU Church in Summit, New Jersey, to join us for that service. And the bus driver says he's going to make it. He says he's going to make it.
Is that because your husband is the bus driver?
Oh, it could. No. But it could. The fact that they're joining us can have something to do that. But it's turned out to be a terrific opportunity for congregations to join together. I mean, on the massive level, we have all these people and people from everywhere joining together. But we also have this opportunity for UU congregations to work together. And it's been really exciting for this suburban church and our urban Central Park West Church to contemplate coming together, and then at the end of that service, the marchers being commissioned, opening the front doors and going out to make our way into the march.
I just want to say that those 1,000 people include UUs from California, because when I left the Bay Area to come out here to serve in D.C., there were people who were talking about joining or boarding a climate train.
Yeah.
You know, an Amtrak train that was leaving out of Emeryville, which is on the bay, so almost the Pacific Ocean. So to come all the way out. So it's really something.
They're coming from all over.
I so wish I could be there.
The people who are sleeping over here are from 3 groups. One is a UU congregation in Vermont, one of them is a UU congregation in Florida, and one of them are students from New Jersey, which I think that's actually more of an interfaith group. But so you know, we're offering hospitality or trying to these people who, like you say, are really coming, and I'm not sure all of them know exactly what they're going to find here. But
you've got a youth group coming from D.C. too, that you may know about. Yeah, you've got people coming from all over, and there's a couple of buses coming from Minnesota, staying I think in Brooklyn.
Yeah, there's the Minnesotans.
I love how the young souls say it's going to be Raucous but Reverent. It's going to have feeling. which kind of
I know. What are they saying?
subtext there is. Okay.
Wow, who would have thought it?
SDS stands for Student Democratic.
So Peggy, what do you hope will come out of this? What's your hope for UUs in general?
Well, I will be honest with you and say I don't have an enormous amount of faith in the UN process. Maybe I shouldn't say that out loud, but you know, we've kind of been here before. So for me, this march actually is more hopeful than just about anything that's happened. I think this is the way for us to, you know, I think we all have these sort of little conversations, planetary, around the globe. We have these little conversations about how things have to change. For me, this is the way we're sort of like putting our bodies down and saying, right now, this is the day we start the change. And we, I think, are going to have conversations, and people will be at conferences and at all kinds of things for days. It's starting. In fact, I was at one yesterday. It's already started, goes through Flood Wall Street on Monday, where we're really kind of getting together in smaller groups and talking about what's next. I know that the UUA and UUSC have partnered on a new project, a new campaign that we're kicking off on Sunday at the march called Commit to Respond. And it's the way for us to take the energy from Sunday and say, really, now what are we doing? What does climate justice really look like in our lives? What are the changes that we really need to make? Not the kind of change light bulbs changes, but the paradigm shift that needs to happen. How do we start talking differently and thinking differently about who and what is marginalized and how we understand the human life on the planet? So I think that actually this is the start of something that's very big and absolutely necessary, and I think the time has come. I think we're ready.
So this is the start, but people have been working on this for decades.
Yes.
And some of those groups are the organizers, or is this really more ad hoc? I mean,
the groups that are doing all this, the conferencing,
organizing, yeah.
Organizing. You know, the organizing is happening. There's a core group of people called the host committee. So that's 350.org. Green Faith has been core. So there are these five groups. Each one of them has taken their own piece of things, and then on each piece, other groups have signed on. So there are hundreds of organizations sponsoring, and not just sponsoring, like putting their names on, but actually really doing the work of making it happen. It is this Occupy model. It's really decentralized. When you're trying to find who's at the core, you're actually still looking at a group. There isn't
are there permits?
There are permits. Yes, this was hard fought. This is New York City. So you may have heard that the march was going to be on the 20th.
So in that way, it's not like Occupy.
Well, no, right. No, there are permits. The march was negotiated and renegotiated and renegotiated and renegotiated. The NYPD is doing fabulous, but they're nervous. They're really nervous. They're nervous about all these people. They're nervous that, you know, dignitaries from all over the place are going to be in New York at the same time. Hundreds of thousands of people are showing up. I mean, they're doing a great job of saying yes, and trying to keep this as safe as possible. So yeah, we've got.
Is the new mayor part of why you think they're cooperative, or I don't know New York politics, but could go a lot of ways what you're describing?
Oh yeah. Oh, I've been part of a protest in New York before. They've gone lots of different ways. Yeah, no, I don't know what his role is. I do know that he appointed all new people to be part of this conversation just because he was coming in and was still sort of doing his appointments. So these are often new people, which also took some extra time. And I would say that while they are open and willing to make this happen, they're also, you know, there's been a lot of things have had to change. We thought we were having a massive service, a prayer service in Central Park, that ultimately they said no to after kind of a couple of months of planning. So, you know, it's the way it goes.
I have to add that there is also that morning going on, or this weekend going on, a horse show in Central Park, the first one ever. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, but you know what? It's New York.
Wow. I know, right? And the park is
worship
big.
trumped by
There are
a
other
horse
marches.
show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big weekend. I mean, there's a lot going on.
Have you gotten any attention from the media yet? Have they picked up on this story or that this is happening?
Absolutely. There have been all kinds of press conferences. The New York Times is a buzz. I know social media is a buzz. You know, there are all these sort of satellite events. So one of them is this Union Theological Conference. So they have invited 200 of the world's top environmental religious leaders for 2 days before the march. As part of all of this, there's a huge...
Wow. I know. Really?
I know. Way cool. Way cool. So I'm actually going to that. So that's it's very exciting.
Will that be podcast or telecast? You know?
Yeah.
You know, at the moment that is they're doing a weird kind of top secret thing going on. You can't even get a list of presenters or participants. You have to have a sign-in code to get any information. But
Yeah,
with
that's
that
weird.
said, yeah.
Hank, was your invitation lost in the mail too? I don't know.
So from the UU world, we've got Fred Small and Tim DeChristopher and Peter Morales and me and Eric Cherry and Pam Spar. So we've got a good group of UUs going, which is nice. You know, I'm not sure that when they say world religions, UUs are always remembered, and this time we really were. And I had a conversation, they said, you know, UUs are at the front of this issue in a way a lot of other denominations aren't. So, yay.
We've got a lot of UUs at UTS. They better not forget us.
Right. Well, right. There may have been
seminarians go there.
Absolutely.
Peggy, speaking of satellite events, I know in Seattle they're also planning a march.
Yes. I just lost the video. I can't hear you.
Okay, now?
Yeah.
Okay, so do you know of other cities? I know in Seattle they're planning a march on Sunday also. Do you know, are any other cities contacting you, letting you know they're doing it there as well?
You know, yes. So now you're going to want to know which one. So I think that San Diego, Boston, I think something is happening.
St. Paul. I think they're
St.
happening.
Paul. There's a huge list. London, Paris. One of the things that's happening is because this is really multinational, this is not a New York, it's not an American thing, this is really a global. So one of the things that's happening is I think they're calling it Make a Noise for Climate Justice, and it's at 1 o'clock in whatever your time zone is. So every house of worship is making whatever their noise is, if that's shofars or bells or whatever that is. So sort of around the planet, there's going to be noise. And at 1 o'clock, actually at 12:58 on the march, we're going to stop in silence. We're going to walk in silence. And then do that for 2 minutes. Imagine hundreds of thousands of people in New York completely silent. And then at 1 o'clock, everyone is going to cry out for justice in whatever way is moving and powerful to use. So
we can ring our Paul Revere bell.
Yeah. I mean, wherever you are, you know, make a noise for justice at 1 o'clock for sure.
And use your phone and document that moment.
You know, I've been in New York when everybody's using their phones before, and it actually stops working. The system collapses. I've had that happen, so I'm a little concerned.
The camera will work.
The camera will work, yeah. But everyone's saying we're going to tweet, and I'm like, yeah, maybe we'll
so, maybe no.
Hard to know.
Yeah, you may actually get the tweet around 2 o'clock.
Right.
I don't know how to finally works its way through the system.
So it'll go around at 1, it'll go around at 2.
So do you have hashtags already set that we can let people know about now, or?
Oh, absolutely. So I actually think I can put them in the. I think I'm prepared. So I just put something up in the group chat. So there are a few of them. There's Commit to Respond. So that's the campaign that's going to run for the next 2 years. That's the way I think for everyone to really plug in and to do. Actually, I think I just did websites. So it's the Commit to Respond is just hashtag Commit to Respond. There's hashtag Climate March. There's also hashtag Faith in Charge. which is the Faith and Change. I wanted to be in charge, but it's not. It's Faith and
Yeah.
Change.
That'll be a different world.
That's a whole other conversation. So Faith and Change is the hashtag for the union conference, but all of those religious environmental leaders are going to be using that hashtag through the conference. So that's a good way to find out what's going on.
Great, and I'm hoping that Shauna Foster is tweeting that out at hashtag The VUU right now. Hashtag Faith in Change. And
the commit to respond.
And commit to respond with the number 2 instead of the word "chew." Yes. And I wanted to just mention that you're watching The VUU, and we are today talking with Peggy, Clarke, and Susan Milnor about the big People's Climate March coming up in New York City this weekend. So I'm getting bad reverb, so I'm going to ask my co-host here to jump in.
Well, Peggy, I had a question, and that I'm really curious what the mood is of the people who are planning to participate. I mean, you obviously have so much enthusiasm, and it seems like a lot of hope. But you know, just this week we're getting more bad news about the climate. So many scientists saying, okay, it's basically don't have any hope. What are the feelings that you're picking up on the other participants? Is it hope? Is it desperation? All of the above.
You know, I was at this conference yesterday called Our Voices, and I was listening to one of the scientists from Columbia who is very famous and whose name I absolutely don't know right now. But he, and he's kind of painting this picture that like the only possible response is depression. It just has this sense of like, let's just, we're done, goodbye. But after he did that, someone kind of got up and first said this gorgeous Muslim prayer and then said, this is our time. This is, here we are. If not now, when? And here we are. Here we all are. We're in the room, and we are together. We are Jews and Muslims. We are Christians and Buddhists and Hindus, and we are ready. I think what this march has done is given us a reason to hope. It has felt like, at least for me in my own life, it has felt like there's nothing. I do whatever a human person can do. I grow an enormous amount of my own food. I've got all the little personal changes that can happen, and yet it feels like we're doomed. This march, it seems to me, has kind of flipped a switch for a lot of people. This sense of we have had no voice, we have had no method, we've had no way of really saying it's done. My house is heated by oil. My choices are oil or no heat at this. So I think the march has been exciting for a lot of people. I think it feels like, oh, we can do something. Maybe we can start something. Maybe we can shift the way we think. So I don't think that my enthusiasm is not. I don't think I'm alone. I think that I think I'm feeding off of everybody else's enthusiasm.
That's so great, and it's wonderful to see your enthusiasm. One thing that I was thinking about listening to you is that I think the United States responds to UN treaties very differently than most countries do. And I was in China after President Bush cut off all the UNFPA funding, interviewing religious leaders about birth control in women and coerced abortion and all of that. Peggy, I'm going to ask you to mute for a second while I just tell this little story. Thank you. Anyway, and so I said to the woman from the UN who was hosting us around, I said, well, it's great, and the UN kind of says these things that are like, advisory, and people do them or they don't do them, but it's not really like a law. And her eyes filled up with tears, and she said, you're talking like the U.S. The U.S. does not actually think that those agreements are binding. They think they're optional. Other countries actually think those are binding. And it's like we're in this covenanted relationship where we have a really different understanding of what our commitment needs to be. So when you said, you're not super hopeful about the UN, I mean, what do you think could come out of the UN that could be useful, and how do we, is that something that will come out of this in terms of the future of engagement, or is this just happen to be there with the UN element of this?
So there are two things that I'm hoping are going to come out of this, and I think that if we hold these up, then these are possibilities. I mean, one of them is I would like the UN to make a goal of bringing carbon down below 350 again, which will require probably a carbon tax, not a cap, but a tax, and an ever-increasing tax. The other thing that I'm hoping, and the UN I think is really positioned to do this, is to ensure that the wealthier countries who are more responsible for the increase of carbon help the developing countries in the suffering from the effects of climate change. So what's happening now is that countries like the United States, and the one really surpassing us now is China, that we're pumping all this carbon into the air, and other countries are suffering from droughts and famines and flooding. So the United Nations is in a position to think globally and to think about how it is that we are really helping each other to get through this. That, for me, do I think that there's real hope for that? I think that I think it is our responsibility to hold those things up and to say that that's what we want. And I think that if we can get, even 500,000 people at this, that starts something. The Our Voices campaign is looking to get tens of millions of people to sign on to it. I think, when you've got tens of millions of people saying, we want you to be doing something, I think it's harder to ignore. Another element of hope for me was that the Secretary General of the United Nations sent an invitation to all of the delegates and world leaders who were going to be at the United Nations on Sunday, asked them all to come to St. John the Divine for the interfaith prayer service that's going to happen there. And essentially he said, it would be good for us to pray with the people, and it would be good for us to hear what the people are talking about. So it seems like a man who wants to be listening. So there's hope in that.
One of the things that Tom Hayden said in his lecture the other day made me think that it's important not to ever expect that whatever happens in the future, policymakers will look back and say, oh, this is because of the People's Climate March. It will never, even if it changes the world, it will never be acknowledged, because the elites never acknowledge these moments. So if we look to the elite to acknowledge that we made a difference, we will always be frustrated. And that's one of the reasons why that was a problem for both the anti-war movement and previous climate movements and the civil rights movement, is that these big events happen and it seems like they have no effect, and yet they do. And yet they do. And so it's important to keep your perspective on that, because it's so easy to get discouraged when you have a big march and it seems like it's a one-day story in the newspaper and then everything goes back. That's not really the way the world is working.
I actually find a lot of these things, I think this is true of divestment campaigns too, that what we're doing is changing social norms. We're changing the way people think, and I don't think we can see that so quickly. There are moments that feel great, but I suspect largely it's for the people who were there they feel great for. But that the shift in what's acceptable socially, you can see, from a longer perspective. So in 10 or 20 years, you can look back and say, that's when this started to happen. But I would agree with you. I don't think that a march like this is not like Monday morning we're going to wake up and, treaty is genius and everything's going to be okay. Corporations have changed their ways. I think it's a long thing, and I think a lot of it has to do with what we think is acceptable and how we are willing to change the ways that we live, and that takes time.
And I also think when I moved, when I came to DC, I was shocked to discover that 40% of folks who live in DC do not have a car. So I also think in a way something like this march reflects some changes that folks have made, and it's not only an opportunity to come together to say we need more change, but I think it's also the opportunity for people to kind of celebrate, to be with their people, if you will, those that are really passionate about this particular social justice issue, and have made changes in their life. I mean, 40% of folks without cars, that means that there's an amazing bus system that I've discovered that works. I didn't bring my car with me. There are, bike sharing that goes on. There are real serious bike lanes now in the city. I mean, it's just, I think it's feeding off of each other. It's feeding like what's happening and pushing for more. So.
I have a question.
New York has the biggest fleet, I believe, of hybrid buses in the world, and so there really are things that have changed. I think it's only I think it's 44% of people here in terms of cars, but it's worth taking note of.
I remember the New Yorker did an article a few years ago, and they were saying, what do you think is the most environmentally sustainable city in the U.S.? And they said it was New York City, because so many people live in high-rises where the heat goes up and people don't drive. And, I pictured some bucolic country, farmland, and they were like, no, everybody there was driving all the time. And, so I think really rethinking what environmentalism looks like to be more urban and less about kind of, fantasy about it, I guess. Ish, I interrupted you. What were you going to say?
I wanted to ask about evangelical involvement, because I understand even within the evangelical movement, there's now a group of clergy that are supporting the climate action. So I wanted to ask if any of them are involved.
Sure, they are. They've been part of, there's an interfaith coalition that has been working on the interfaith contingent. There are evangelicals involved with that. They are expecting a good group. Actually, the UUs that we're located right across from the evangelicals and the Pentecostals, and right between the Hindus and the Quakers. So we're going to be sort of, walking buddies with the evangelicals and Pentecostals, and the Reverend Jim Wallace.
It's not alphabetical.
No, I think we were placed according to size. And the Reverend Jim Wallace, who's an evangelical, the editor of Sojourners, is going to be at that union conference and is really speaking out for evangelical involvement in climate justice.
I love the idea of all the side conversations that'll happen. When Patrice was describing that train, I was picturing days of conversation where people can dream up new dreams. And the same will happen when you stand around for 1,000,000 hours waiting to move, that people will just start talking to each other. And to me, that's where a lot of the real life of a movement happens, in those in-between times.
And that's when, that's the time when people reflect back when they get tired, or fatigued or frustrated. They'll think, 10 years from now, I can do it. Wow, that was so great to be with all of those people in New York City. So that's the kind of thing that, I don't know, I think that these kinds of gatherings are so important for justice seekers. Whether, as Tom was saying, anybody ever gives us credit, which is, of course, its own kind of bummer. But those side conversations and that love and that energy that you feel when everybody's sort of moving and hoping, on one dream, it's just really powerful.
One of the things the interfaith contingent will be doing together is singing. What's the language we all know? And there were two. One was silence. We're going to be in silence together during the service for about 5 minutes, and we're going to sing. We're going to sing This Little Light of Mine, and we're marching in the light of God, and all of those songs that everybody just kind of knows, including us. We all know them.
So you just need to bring their book of translation, right?
Yeah, right. That's right.
Yeah, I always think of that story about Robert McNamara, who was the Secretary of Defense during the war on Vietnam, since we talked about SDS today. And I was a child, okay, but I've heard this story because he said that the protesters really gave him pause about what he was doing in Vietnam. He could hear the protests going on. He did not change his course of action. He did not renounce what he was doing. But the fact that years later he said that he almost did, or that he considered it, or that it hurt, said to me, there's impact, even when we don't see anything. And of course, we all wish that story had gone differently. But the fact that he had remorse about that, even years later, said to me that it's worth speaking out morally. And that's, you know, I think that's what's so exciting about this for all of us.
Amen.
I think that's one of the things I sometimes have. There's a friend of mine that we have this sort of back and forth where, you know, he argues for, you know, as institutions, we need to make institutional change, and I argue, yes, but those institutions are full of people, individuals, you know, who go home at night or you know, have daughters or whatever that is, and you know. Yeah, I think that we have to always remember that they are individuals, and that it's really easy for us to sometimes demonize those who are, you know, espousing, who are actually up there at the mic.
Who are demons?
And, you know, we sometimes forget that they must be, you know, sometimes they must be conflicted inside, you know, and maybe even, you know, not sure of what they're saying, even though they look like they are. So we just have to just keep on sending the love.
Susan, I'm curious what you hope for your congregation on the Monday after the march. I mean, where do you think they'll just probably all crash for a while because they'll all be tired? But as the energy returns, where do you imagine that it might most usefully serve the people?
Well, I have two views of that. One is as the minister of the church, and one is as the interim minister of the church. And as the interim minister of the church, I think I hope for them to have a sense of being part of a much larger effort and a larger Unitarian Universalist, a larger interfaith, and just sense that there is something for them to do with the place they occupy in the world that can make a difference. So as an interim minister. As a minister, I look at the fact that one of, at this point, the few social justice active groups in the church is a sustainability committee who has been working for a while, but which really seems to have a new energy from this event and from being involved in that event. And so I hope that that energy is going to settle into a long-term commitment to continuing that work and the passion that some of the people are bringing to that, and looking at more long-term ways and what we can do with that in this building as well as in terms of witness and changing people's hearts.
There's been a lot of buzz this week about Naomi Klein's new book. This Changes Everything. What is it? Capitalism versus the Climate. Are people who are going to this talking about that?
I've been hearing people talk about that she has a book. I don't know anyone who's read it. I mean, it just came out. I did read Mark Bittman's article yesterday talking about it, and he thinks that, you know, he thinks this does change everything. He thinks that this many people caring about one issue across national borders, across languages and denominations, that this is the time that something could really change, and not just change like we're going to get a carbon tax, but change like human beings are going to live differently. And we're going to have to do it quickly, but we're going to have to change the way that we live in a pretty radical way. And as I understand it, Naomi Klein's book is saying essentially the same thing, and that she's pretty hopeful about it. That this is an enormous opportunity for us to be our best selves.
She was interviewed on Chris Hayes last night.
Okay.
Yes. And I was going to say, I suspect that some conservatives are going to be paying a lot of attention to her book, because she essentially embraces what they often accuse the climate change movement of being about, which is socialism. I mean, that's one of the current big things for the right and the religious right, but especially just the right, to say that climate change is really about becoming socialist.
Yes.
Well, it puts it on the table, doesn't it?
Yeah. The polemic versus the lifestyle. One of the groups I'm impressed with, in the Twin Cities anyway, is Transition Town, which is really, and I know that at least some UU churches are involved with Transitions, which started in England and is about people learning to live differently. And so Transitions in my neighborhood is about people canning food together and talking about, sharing cars and, just really changing their own lives in a way that, Peggy, you were saying you've done everything you can, but frankly, a lot of us, me included, haven't. I went up last summer and looked at the fracking in North Dakota because I wanted to see it, and I came back all full of how horrible it was, and to my shock, my teenager said, "I support fracking." And I said, "What? You support fracking? Are you just being obstinate?" And Gia said, "Look at the way we live. Somebody's got to have oil for it, and I'd rather we destroyed our own country than went and bombed other people and took their oil. So unless we really change the way we live, yeah, I support fracking." And I was like, this is a kid who can nail it every time, But really, my lifestyle is not sustainable. Everyone in the world could not live the way that I do, and so I'm, here I am with my trusty water bottle, and I drive a Prius, and I do all those things. But truth be told, I haven't adapted to the level at which we all are going to need to change if we're going to make it. And so it's a humbling, it's a humbling pull, I think, about the privilege that some of us do live with and what that'll look like. So it's exciting, though. I really do echo your excitement about focusing together on a global goal like that and getting out of our little bubbles of privilege about it. Yeah. Last words to our guests, Susan and Peggy?
I wish I could be there with you. I wish I could be there, but I'm going somewhere else. But I wish I could be there. It sounds like an incredible event.
Yeah, amen. And without the environment, we have nothing. So we're all on the same page. And good luck to you. And I'll be looking forward to seeing the media about it, the coverage.
Can't wait to see the tweets, even if they're a few hours later.
Yeah, and if you're able to bust out of the secrecy of the UTS event, I'll be love to see some tweets from that too. Maybe even podcasts.
Well, I can, as soon as it starts, and I can absolutely, and I'm planning to tweet and tell everybody what's going on inside those walls.
Unless you're forbidden.
No, once it starts, I think it's just that they're not making it. I don't know what I don't know. I shouldn't speak for them. I really don't know.
Peggy, Susan, last words to us?
I would just like to acknowledge, while we're still on the air here, the incredible work that Peggy has put into this and done. I mean, the hours and hours and weeks and months of effort on so many different levels, including, taking the emails of frantic congregational ministers about what's going to happen. And so, really, seriously, Peggy, thank you so much for your work and for your intention and for your goodwill about it all.
Thank you. And I would want to say that this is our work. This is the work for our day, and I am very grateful to have an opportunity to do it. And thank you all for listening to the story.
Thanks so much for coming. This has been another hour of The VUU. I want to give a nod to the man behind the chalice, Bob LaValle, who's been helping us out with tech today. And please tweet, tell your friends to march wherever you are. Look at the 2 hashtags or websites. I'm going to scroll back to them here. Oh, go ahead, Peggy. Tell them again.
The hashtags are hashtag commit to respond with the number 2, commit to respond, and hashtag faith in change, and hashtag climate march. And websites committorespond.org.
Thank you so much. Take care. I'll see you next time.